The chandeliers above cast a warm golden glow across the reception hall. 200 guests sat in their finest attire, champagne flutes glinting in their hands, waiting for the speeches to begin. I stood there in my tailored suit, my bride beside me in her flowing white dress. And for a moment, just one perfect moment, I believed everything would be all right. Then my mother-in-law stood up. The room quieted. I assumed she was about to give the traditional mother's toast, perhaps share an embarrassing childhood story about my bride, make everyone laugh. That's what mothers do at weddings, right? But the words that came out of her mouth weren't warm or celebratory. They were cold, calculated, and designed to trap me. "From now on," she announced, her voice carrying across the silent hall, "you'll transfer your $7,900 salary and every bonus to our family, every single month. If you refuse this arrangement, then walk out of this wedding right now." The air left the room. I turned to look at my bride, the woman I'd planned to spend my life with, expecting her to speak up, to tell her mother this was insane, to defend me, to defend us. She remained silent, her eyes fixed on the floor, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. In that moment, I understood everything. I adjusted my suit jacket, took one last look at the woman I thought I knew, and turned toward the exit. My footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Behind me, gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered my name. My mother-in-law's voice rose in indignation, but I didn't turn back. I walked out of my own wedding. Hours later, sitting alone in my apartment, my phone began to ring. The screen illuminated the darkness around me with an unknown number. I stared at it, my finger hovering over the answer button, not knowing that this call would reveal a truth far more disturbing than anything I'd imagined. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. My name is David Chen, and up until 3 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I'm 32 years old, a project manager at a mid-sized tech firm, pulling in $7,900 a month with quarterly bonuses that could add another $10,000 to $15,000 annually. Not rich by any means, but comfortable, stable, the kind of income that could support a family, buy a decent house in the suburbs, maybe take a vacation once a year. I met Sarah at a mutual friend's barbecue 2 years ago. She was 28, worked as an administrative assistant at a hospital, and had this quiet, gentle demeanor that drew me in immediately. In a world of loud personalities and constant self-promotion, she seemed like a refuge. She listened more than she spoke. She smiled with her eyes. She made me feel like I could be myself without performance or pretense. Our relationship progressed naturally. 6 months of dating, a year of serious commitment, and then I proposed on a weekend trip to the mountains. She said yes without hesitation, tears streaming down her face, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. But if I'm being honest, and I need to be honest now, there were signs. Small things I chose to ignore because I was in love, because I wanted so badly for this to work, because the alternative meant admitting I'd made a mistake. The first red flag appeared about 4 months into our engagement. We were having dinner at her parents' house, a modest 2-story home in a working-class neighborhood. Her mother, Patricia, had prepared an elaborate meal. Her father, Robert, barely spoke throughout dinner, occasionally nodding at his wife's comments, but otherwise focused intently on his plate. Patricia, on the other hand, was all energy and questions. She asked about my job, my salary, my benefits package, my retirement contributions. At first, I thought she was just being a concerned mother, making sure her daughter was marrying someone who could provide. That's normal, right? Parents want security for their children. $7,900 a month, she repeated when I told her my salary, her eyes calculating something I couldn't quite read. And bonuses? How much in bonuses? Depends on the quarter, I said, slightly uncomfortable with the interrogation. Could be anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 per quarter if we hit our targets. She nodded slowly, a strange smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That's very good, David. Very good indeed. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, but when I glanced at her, she was looking at her mother with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Not pride or happiness, but something closer to relief? Resignation? The second red flag came a month later. Sarah and I were apartment hunting, trying to find a place for after the wedding. We'd agreed on a budget, something reasonable that would allow us to save money and still live comfortably. But during one viewing, as we stood in the empty living room discussing furniture placement, Sarah's phone buzzed continuously. She pulled it out, frowned, and typed a rapid response. Then another. Then another. "Everything okay?" I asked. "It's my mom," she said, still typing. "She's asking about our budget." "Why does she need to know our budget?" Sarah looked up at me, and there was that expression again, something trapped and helpless in her eyes. She likes to be involved. She wants to make sure we're making smart decisions. We're adults, Sarah. We can make our own decisions. I know, she said quickly. I know. It's easier to keep her informed. She worries. I let it go. I didn't want to be the fiancé who came between a mother and daughter. But something about the exchange bothered me, a nagging feeling I couldn't quite name. The third red flag should have been a siren. 2 months before the wedding, Sarah approached me with a strange request. We were sitting on my couch, watching a movie, when she suddenly paused it and turned to me with an expression of forced casualness. David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to not get upset. My stomach tightened. Nothing good ever follows those words. Okay. How would you feel about sharing our finances with my parents? Like helping them out sometimes? What do you mean by helping them out? She fidgeted with the edge of a throw pillow. They've had some financial difficulties lately. Nothing major, just some unexpected expenses. My mom was thinking that maybe, after we're married, we could send them some money each month, just to help them get back on their feet. How much money are we talking about? I don't know, maybe a few hundred? 500? $500 a month was a significant amount, especially when we were trying to save for our own future. But I loved Sarah, and I understood that family sometimes needs help. Okay, I said slowly. If they're in trouble, we can help. But I'd like to know what the money is going toward. I'd like to understand the full situation. Her face brightened with relief. Really? You'd do that? Of course. Family helps family. She kissed me, and in that moment of affection, I missed the way her shoulders remained tense, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Over the next 2 months, as the wedding approached, there were more small incidents. Patricia calling to ask if I'd considered contributing to the wedding costs, even though she and Robert had insisted on paying. Sarah mentioning that her mother needed help with a small emergency. And could I send $200? Then another emergency. Then another. Each time, I sent the money. Each time, Sarah thanked me with guilty eyes and changed the subject quickly. Each time, I told myself this was just temporary, that after the wedding, things would settle down, that every family has financial rough patches. I was building a fantasy, constructing a narrative that let me ignore the truth that was right in front of me. Sarah wasn't just close to her mother. She was controlled by her. Every decision, every conversation, every aspect of her life seemed to flow through Patricia's approval. And I, blinded by love and optimism, convinced myself that marriage would somehow free her from that dynamic. I couldn't have been more wrong. My best friend, Marcus, tried to warn me 2 weeks before the wedding. We were at a bar, having what was supposed to be a low-key bachelor party, just the two of us, some beers, and a basketball game on TV. Man, I need to say something, and you're probably going to hate me for it, Marcus said during a commercial break. Go ahead. Are you sure about this wedding? About Sarah's family? I bristled immediately. What's that supposed to mean? Her mother is intense, and Sarah doesn't seem to push back on anything. Every time I see them together, it's like Sarah's waiting for permission to breathe. She's just close to her family. That's not a crime. Close is one thing. This is something else. And all those emergencies they keep having, that you keep paying for, that's going to continue after you're married, probably get worse. You're being paranoid. Marcus sighed and took a long drink of his beer. Maybe. I hope I am. But I'm your friend, and I'd be a terrible friend if I didn't at least say something. Just keep your eyes open, okay? I nodded, but I didn't really hear him. I was too focused on the wedding, on the future I'd planned, on the life I believed Sarah and I would build together. Marcus's concerns seemed like the cynicism of someone who'd been through a bad breakup himself. I thought he was projecting. Now, sitting in that reception hall with 200 witnesses, I understood that Marcus had seen what I'd refused to see. He'd recognized the trap, the slowly tightening noose, the reality I desperately tried to deny. And now that noose had been pulled tight in the most public, humiliating way possible. The morning of my wedding started with a phone call at 6:30. I was already awake, too nervous and excited to sleep, doing push-ups in my apartment to burn off anxious energy. When my phone rang, I assumed it was Marcus calling to coordinate our arrival at the venue. It was Sarah. Hey, I answered, slightly out of breath. Aren't we not supposed to talk on the wedding day? Bad luck? That's just seeing each other, she said. Her voice sounded strained, tight. Can we talk as allowed? You okay? You sound stressed. I'm fine. Just wedding day nerves, you know? But it didn't sound like normal nerves. It sounded like fear. Sarah, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to hear your voice. A pause. You're sure about this, right? About us? Of course I'm sure. Are you sure? Yes. Yes, I'm sure. I love you, David. I love you too. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear voices in the background, muffled but urgent. I have to go, Sarah said quickly. My mom needs help with something. I'll see you at the altar. The call ended before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, a cold feeling settling in my chest. Something in her voice had been wrong. Not just nervous, but desperate, like someone calling for help but unable to say the words explicitly. I shook it off. Wedding day nerves, I told myself. Completely normal. Marcus picked me up at 8. We drove to the venue, a beautiful historic mansion with manicured gardens and a grand ballroom. The ceremony would be outside, weather permitting, and the reception inside. Sarah and I had toured it 6 months ago, both of us falling in love with the romantic architecture and elegant atmosphere. As we pulled up, I saw Patricia's car already parked near the entrance. Early, as always. She was the type who needed to control every detail, to oversee every decision, to ensure everything met her exact specifications. You ready for this? Marcus asked as we got out of the car. Born ready. He gave me a look that clearly said he wasn't convinced, but he clapped me on the shoulder and grabbed my garment bag from the back seat. Let's get you married then. The groom's preparation room was on the second floor, overlooking the gardens. Marcus helped me into my suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with ivory tie and pocket square. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. I looked older somehow, more serious. This was it. Today I became a husband. The ceremony itself was perfect. Sarah walked down the aisle on her father's arm, looking absolutely stunning in her gown. Robert's face was unreadable, as always, but he shook my hand firmly when he placed Sarah's hand in mine. The officiant led us through our vows. Sarah's voice cracked with emotion when she said, I do. I'm not ashamed to admit mine did too. We were married. The reception began at 5 o'clock. The ballroom had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale, flowers everywhere, candles glowing on every table, a live band setting up in the corner. Guests mingled, congratulating us, taking photos, loading their plates from the buffet. Everything was exactly as we'd planned. But I noticed things, small things that didn't quite fit the perfect picture. Patricia was unusually quiet during the cocktail hour. Normally, she would have been working the room, greeting guests, basking in the attention that comes with being mother of the bride. Instead, she sat at her table, her face tense, occasionally checking her phone. Robert sat beside her, even more withdrawn than usual, staring at his untouched champagne. Sarah was distracted. During our first dance, which should have been an intimate moment between us, she kept glancing over my shoulder toward her parents' table. Her smile was bright for the cameras, but when the flashes stopped, her face would fall into an expression of deep worry. What's wrong? I whispered as we swayed to the music. Nothing, she said automatically. Everything's perfect. But she squeezed my hand too tightly, her nails digging into my palm. After the first dance, we made our rounds, table to table, thanking guests for coming. At each stop, Sarah would smile and chat, but her eyes kept drifting back to her mother. Patricia was now in deep conversation with Robert, her lips moving rapidly, her hands gesturing urgently. Robert's face had gone pale. When we finally reached their table, Patricia looked up at us with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, something between triumph and desperation, like a gambler about to play their final hand. Congratulations, you two, she said, her voice slightly too loud. Sarah, sweetheart, come sit with me for a moment. Mom? We're in the middle of... Sit, now. Sarah sat. I remained standing, confused, a strange prickling sensation creeping up my spine. Patricia leaned in and whispered something to Sarah. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Sarah's face drain of color. She shook her head slightly. Patricia whispered more urgently. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. What's going on? I asked. Patricia looked up at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nothing you need to worry about yet, David. Just mother-daughter talk. Yet. The word hung in the air like a threat. The speeches began around 7:30. Marcus went first as my best man, delivering a funny and heartfelt toast about our friendship and how happy he was to see me find love. Sarah's maid of honor spoke next, sharing embarrassing stories from their high school days. People laughed, people cried. It was beautiful. Then Patricia stood up. The room quieted immediately. I assumed this was her big moment, the traditional mother's toast. I smiled at her, waiting for the warm words, the funny anecdotes, the tearful well-wishes that mothers give. What came instead shattered everything. "I want to talk about marriage," Patricia began, her voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. "About what it really means to join two families together. About responsibility and sacrifice and commitment." Something in her tone made my smile falter. This didn't sound like a toast. This sounded like a sermon, or a threat. "David," she continued, turning to look directly at me, "you're a good man with a good job. You make $7,900 a month plus bonuses. You're stable, you're reliable. That's why we approved this marriage." Approved? My skin went cold. "Now that you're part of our family, we have expectations. Our family has struggled financially and we need support. So here's what's going to happen." She paused, letting the suspense build, enjoying the power of the moment. "From now on, you'll transfer your entire salary and every bonus to our family account. We'll manage the money, we'll decide how it's spent, and we'll give you an allowance as needed. This is non-negotiable. This is what family does. They support each other." The room was completely silent. 200 people stared at us, at me, waiting for my response. I felt like I was underwater, like the words weren't quite reaching my brain, like this couldn't possibly be real. "If you refuse," Patricia continued, her voice hardening, "if you're not willing to commit to this family the way we need you to, then walk out of this wedding right now. Leave. We don't need a son-in-law who's too selfish to help his family." I turned to Sarah, my new wife, my partner, the person who was supposed to stand beside me through anything. Surely she would speak up now. Surely she would tell her mother this was insane, that this wasn't how marriage works, that I wasn't an ATM machine for their financial problems. But Sarah just stood there, tears streaming down her face, her eyes locked on the floor, her body trembling. She wasn't going to defend me. She'd known this was coming. Maybe she'd even agreed to it. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. My chest tightened. My vision blurred at the edges. Everything I'd believed about Sarah, about our relationship, about our future together, it was all a lie. Or worse, it was a carefully constructed plan to trap me into financial slavery. 200 faces stared at me, waiting. Patricia stood with her arms crossed, confident in her ultimatum. Robert wouldn't meet my eyes. Sarah wept silently beside me. And in that moment, I made the easiest and hardest decision of my life. I adjusted my suit jacket, straightened my tie, and turned toward the exit. The first step was the hardest. My legs felt like they were filled with concrete, my body screaming at me to stay, to fix this somehow, to find a way to make it work. But my mind was clear. Crystal clear. Clearer than it had been in months. This wasn't love. This was a transaction. And I wasn't for sale. The second step came easier, then the third. I walked through the ballroom, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor, impossibly loud in the absolute silence. 200 guests tracked my movement, their faces a blur of shock and confusion. I heard whispers starting behind me, a wave of gossip that would follow me out the door and into the rest of my life. "David," Sarah's voice, small and broken, called after me. "David, wait, please." I didn't turn around. If I turned around, if I saw her face, I might weaken. I might convince myself to stay, to negotiate, to find some compromise. But there was no compromising with what Patricia had demanded. There was only submission or freedom. I chose freedom. "He's not a real man," Patricia's voice shrieked across the ballroom, shrill with fury and disbelief. "A real man takes care of his family. A real man doesn't run away when things get difficult." I pushed through the double doors into the marble hallway. The doors swung shut behind me, muffling the chaos I'd left in my wake. I kept walking. Through the mansion's grand entrance, down the stone steps, across the parking lot to where Marcus had parked my car that morning. I got in, closed the door, and sat there in the driver's seat, my hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. What had I just done? I'd walked out of my own wedding. I'd left my bride at the altar, or rather, at the reception. I'd humiliated her family in front of 200 witnesses. I'd destroyed months of planning, thousands of dollars in deposits, a future that had seemed so certain just hours ago. And yet, somehow, I felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't even realized was there, and someone had just lifted it off my shoulders. My phone was already buzzing in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw notifications flooding the screen, texts from Marcus, calls from unknown numbers. A voicemail from my mother, who'd been sitting in the third row, asking what was happening and if I was okay. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Not yet. I needed time to process, to understand what had just happened, to figure out my next steps. I started the car and drove. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just drove through the city as the sun set, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple. I drove past the apartment Sarah and I had picked out together, the one we were supposed to move into next week. I drove past the restaurant where I'd proposed. I drove past all the landmarks of our relationship, saying goodbye to each one. Eventually, I found myself in an empty parking lot overlooking the river. I parked, killed the engine, and just sat there as darkness fell around me. The phone kept buzzing. I watched the notifications pile up. Dozens of texts, missed calls, voicemails. The entire wedding was trying to reach me, trying to understand, trying to drag me back into the drama I'd just escaped. I turned the phone off. The silence was incredible. No buzzing, no ringing, no demands. Just me and the sound of water lapping against the riverbank. I leaned back in my seat and let the tears come. Not tears of regret or doubt, but tears of grief. Grief for the relationship I'd thought I had. Grief for the woman I'd thought Sarah was. Grief for the future I'd imagined that would never exist. I sat there for hours, crying and thinking, and slowly accepting the reality of my situation. My marriage had lasted approximately 3 hours. I was going to have to untangle all the legal paperwork, cancel the honeymoon flights, figure out what to do with the apartment lease we'd signed together. I was going to have to face my family, my friends, my coworkers, and explain what had happened. But all of that could wait. Right now, I just needed to breathe. Around midnight, I turned my phone back on. The screen immediately lit up with notifications. Over 100 messages now, nearly 40 missed calls. I scrolled through them, not reading closely, just getting a sense of the chaos. Messages from Sarah. Where did you go? Please call me. We need to talk. I'm sorry. Please. Messages from Patricia. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. Come back and apologize. You owe us an explanation. How dare you treat us like this? Messages from Marcus. Dude, where are you? Are you okay? Call me when you can. Seriously, man, I'm worried. Messages from my mother. David, please call. I'm here if you need me. Your father and I left the wedding. We support you. And then, at the bottom of the list, a message from an unknown number. This is Robert, Sarah's father. I know you don't want to hear from any of us right now, but I saw what happened. I know why you left. Please, when you're ready, call me. You saved yourself. I stared at that last message for a long time. Robert had barely spoken 2 words to me in the entire 2 years I'd known Sarah. He was a ghost in his own house, a shadow behind Patricia's overwhelming presence, and now he was reaching out to me, telling me I'd saved myself. What did that mean? My finger hovered over the call button, but I wasn't ready yet. I needed more time, more distance, more clarity, before I dove back into the mess I'd left behind. I drove home to my apartment, not the new one Sarah and I were supposed to share. I climbed into bed fully clothed, still wearing my wedding suit, and finally fell into an exhausted, dreamless sleep. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt different, clearer, stronger. I'd made a choice, and now I had to live with it. And strangely, that felt manageable. I'd faced the worst-case scenario, walked away from my own wedding, and survived. Whatever came next couldn't be worse than that. I woke up on Sunday morning still wearing my wedding suit, the tie loosened around my neck, my shoes kicked off beside the bed. For a brief, disorienting moment, I thought maybe it had all been a nightmare. Then I saw my phone on the nightstand, the screen dark, but somehow menacing, and reality crashed back down. It was real, all of it. I sat up slowly, my body aching from tension and emotional exhaustion. The apartment was too quiet. I'd imagined this morning going so differently, waking up beside Sarah, maybe in a hotel room near the venue, maybe already at the airport heading to our honeymoon in Costa Rica. We'd be laughing, exhausted, calling each other husband and wife, and marveling at how different everything felt. Instead, I was alone, unmarried, and facing a social disaster that would define me for years. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, finally forcing myself to turn on my phone. The screen lit up, and immediately new notifications flooded in. The counter showed 137 unread messages now. I took a deep breath and started reading, organizing them mentally into categories. Sarah had sent 42 messages throughout the night. The early ones were confused. Where did you go? Are you okay? People are asking about you. Then they turned, desperate. Please answer. I'm so sorry. This isn't what I wanted. Please give me a chance to explain. The most recent one sent at 3 a.m. I know you hate me. I hate myself too, but please just talk to me. Please. Patricia's messages were fewer, but more aggressive. She'd started with outrage. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. How could you do this? Then shifted to manipulation. Sarah is devastated. You broke her heart. A real man would have stayed and worked it out. Her final message, sent around 9 this morning. We will be pursuing legal action for the cost of the wedding. You will be hearing from our lawyer. Robert's messages were brief and oddly gentle. I understand why you left. Please call when you're ready. There are things you need to know. Marcus had sent about 20 messages, mostly checking if I was alive and offering to come over. My mother had sent worried texts. A few friends from the wedding had reached out, confused and concerned. Even my boss had texted, having heard through the grapevine that something dramatic had happened at my wedding. I didn't know where to start. The idea of responding to everyone, of explaining and defending and justifying my decision over and over again, felt impossible. But I couldn't just disappear either. These were people who cared about me, who deserved some kind of explanation. I started with Marcus. I texted, I'm okay, I'm home, need some time, but I'm okay. He responded within seconds, Thank God, I'm coming over. You don't have to. I'm already in my car. 20 minutes later, Marcus was sitting across from me at my kitchen table, 2 fresh cups of coffee between us. He didn't ask questions right away, just sat there, giving me space to talk when I was ready. She knew, I finally said. Sarah knew what her mother was going to do. She knew, and she didn't warn me, and she didn't defend me when it happened. Marcus nodded slowly. I figured as much. The way she was acting during the reception, she looked terrified. Terrified of her mother, maybe, but not enough to stand up to her. Not enough to protect me. I rubbed my face with both hands. 2 years, Marcus. 2 years I thought I knew her. How did I miss this? Because you loved her, and because they hid it well. This wasn't about you being stupid or naive. This was about them being manipulative as hell. We sat in silence for a while. Then Marcus asked the question I'd been dreading. What are you going to do? I don't know. I need to cancel the honeymoon, figure out the apartment situation, start annulment proceedings, I guess. The word felt strange in my mouth. Annulment. Not divorce. We'd barely been married long enough for that. Just erasure. What about Patricia threatening legal action? I laughed, a bitter sound. Let her try. She demanded I hand over my entire salary, in front of 200 witnesses. I'd love to see her explain that to a judge. Marcus grinned. That's the spirit. You going to talk to Sarah? I don't know. Part of me wants answers. Part of me thinks it doesn't matter anymore. And what about Robert? That message was weird, right? You saved yourself? What does that mean? I pulled out my phone and reread Robert's messages. I have no idea, but he said there are things I need to know. Could be a trap. Patricia trying to use him to get to you? Maybe, but Robert's never been on Patricia's side. He's always just been absent, checked out, like he gave up on fighting a long time ago. Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking. So call him. Worst case, you hang up. Best case, you get some answers. He was right. I needed to understand what had happened. Needed to know if Sarah had been complicit from the beginning, or if she'd been trapped by her mother just like Robert seemed to be. I needed to know if the woman I'd loved for 2 years had ever really existed, or if she'd been a carefully constructed fiction designed to lure me into Patricia's financial web. I picked up my phone and called Robert's number. It rang 3 times, and I was about to hang up when he answered. David. His voice was quiet, cautious. Thank you for calling. Your message said I saved myself. What did you mean? A long pause. I could hear Patricia's voice in the background, asking who he was talking to. Robert's voice became even quieter. I can't talk now. Can we meet? Just the 2 of us? When? This afternoon. There's a coffee shop on 5th Street near the park. Do you know it? I know it. 3 o'clock? I'll be there. David, Robert said, his voice suddenly urgent. Don't tell Sarah. Don't tell anyone. Patricia can't know I'm meeting you. The line went dead. I looked at Marcus, who'd been listening to my side of the conversation. That wasn't ominous at all, he said. You think it's a trap? I think it's weird. But I also think you need answers, and he's offering them. Just be careful, and text me when you get there and when you leave, so I know you're okay. We spent the rest of the morning dealing with practical matters. Marcus helped me draft a message to send to Sarah. I need some time to process everything. Please don't contact me for now. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Short, direct, non-emotional. I sent similar messages to Patricia and to the handful of relatives who'd been texting. Then I called the airline and canceled the honeymoon flights. The customer service rep clearly sensed something was wrong from my tone, but was professional enough not to ask. I lost the deposits, but I didn't care. Money seemed meaningless after yesterday. At 2:30, I drove to the coffee shop. It was a quiet place. the kind with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, not a chain, but a neighborhood spot where people actually knew each other's names. I got there early and claimed a corner table where I could see the entrance. Robert arrived exactly at 3 o'clock. He looked terrible, exhausted, his face drawn, his shoulders slumped like he was carrying an impossible weight. He ordered a black coffee and sat down across from me, his hands wrapped around the cup like he needed the warmth. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "You said I saved myself. I want to know what you meant." Robert took a long sip of coffee, his eyes scanning the shop to make sure no one was listening. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I should have warned you. I wanted to, but I was too much of a coward." He looked up at me, and I saw real pain in his eyes. "David, you need to understand something. The woman you saw yesterday at the wedding, Patricia, that's who she really is, and she's been destroying our family for 20 years. Robert spoke for the next hour, and with every word, my understanding of Sarah's family shifted from confusion to horror. This wasn't just about controlling behavior or difficult in-laws. This was about systematic financial abuse, manipulation, and a family held hostage by one woman's insatiable need for control and money. "I met Patricia 29 years ago," Robert began, his coffee growing cold in his hands. "She was beautiful, charming, attentive, everything I thought I wanted. We got married after dating for only 6 months. I was young and stupid and in love. Sound familiar?" I nodded grimly. "For the first few years, everything seemed normal. We bought a house, had Sarah, lived like any other young family. But gradually, so gradually I didn't notice until it was too late, Patricia started taking control of everything. First it was just managing the household budget. That made sense. She was home with Sarah while I worked. Then it was taking over all our bank accounts to streamline our finances. Then it was having my paychecks directly deposited into accounts only she could access." "And you let her?" "I didn't let her, David. She did it piece by piece, and always with a reasonable explanation, always making me feel like I was being unreasonable if I objected. And by the time I realized what was happening, I was trapped. Every dollar I earned went into accounts I couldn't access. She gave me an allowance, my own money, given back to me like I was a child. I felt sick." "How much?" "Started at $500 a month, now it's $200. For everything, gas, lunch, clothes, anything personal. The rest of my paycheck, all $48,000 a year, goes into her accounts. And I have no idea what she does with it." "You never tried to fight back? To open your own account?" Robert's laugh was bitter and hollow. "I tried once, about 10 years ago. Went to a lawyer, started looking into separation. She found out, I still don't know how. And the next thing I knew, she'd maxed out credit cards in my name, destroyed my credit, and convinced Sarah that I was trying to abandon them. She told Sarah I didn't love her anymore, that I was planning to leave and never look back. Sarah was 18 and devastated. She begged me to stay, crying, telling me she needed her father. So you stayed. So I stayed, and I've been staying ever since, living in my own house like a prisoner, working to fund Patricia's spending, watching her control every aspect of our lives. I became a ghost in my own family, David. I stopped fighting because fighting only made things worse." The pieces were falling into place. Robert's silence at family dinners, his refusal to make eye contact, the way he faded into the background of every interaction. He wasn't just quiet. He was broken. "What about Sarah?" I asked. "Does she know? Is she like her mother?" Robert's face crumpled. "That's the worst part. Sarah's not like Patricia, but she's been so manipulated, so conditioned to obey her mother, that she can't break free either. Patricia's been grooming her since childhood to see this as normal, to see controlling men's finances as protecting the family or being smart with money." "So Sarah knew what Patricia was planning at the wedding?" "Yes. Patricia told her 2 weeks ago. They had a huge fight. I could hear them screaming through the walls. Sarah said it was wrong, that she loved you, that you deserved better. But Patricia wore her down. She always does. By the wedding day, Sarah had accepted that it would happen. She probably hoped you'd just agree, that it wouldn't cause a scene. I walked away from my own wedding, Robert. I know, and that took more courage than you realize." He finally met my eyes. "I've been watching Patricia set this trap for 2 years, ever since Sarah brought you home that first time. The moment Patricia learned about your salary, your stability, your bonuses, I saw the look in her eyes. You weren't a potential son-in-law, you were a new revenue stream. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm. I needed air." "Why didn't you warn me?" "Because I'm a coward," Robert said simply. "Because Patricia controls everything, our phones, our email, our finances. If I'd tried to warn you, she would have found out and punished Sarah. And despite everything, I love my daughter. I couldn't put her through that. So you let me walk into the trap instead? Yes. He didn't try to excuse it. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. But when you walked out yesterday, when you refused Patricia's ultimatum in front of all those people, you did what I've been too weak to do for 20 years. You chose freedom. We sat in heavy silence. I didn't know what to say, how to process this information. Part of me felt vindicated. I'd made the right choice by leaving. But another part felt overwhelming sadness for Robert, for Sarah, for the family that had been destroyed by one woman's pathological need for control. There's more you need to know, Robert said, his voice dropping even lower. The reason Patricia is so desperate for money, the reason she planned this elaborate scheme with you, it's because she's in serious financial trouble. What kind of trouble? She has over $300,000 in credit card debt. I stared at him. How is that even possible? Shopping addiction, mostly. Designer clothes she wears once, expensive jewelry she never wears, online shopping, QVC, you name it. She hides the packages, lies about the charges, and has been juggling minimum payments for years. But it's finally catching up with her. The credit cards are maxing out, collection agencies are calling. She's been dodging debt collectors for 6 months. And she thought my salary would fix this? She thought your salary would let her make minimum payments while continuing to spend. She had it all planned out. Take your entire paycheck, give you maybe $500 back as allowance, use the rest to service her debt and fund her shopping. And because you'd be married to Sarah, you'd be legally tied to the family, harder to escape. The trap had been even more elaborate than I'd realized. This wasn't just about controlling me, it was about using me to fund Patricia's addiction, while keeping me legally and emotionally bound to the family. Does Sarah know about the debt? I think she suspects, but Patricia keeps the details hidden. Sarah knows her mother overspends, but $300,000? No, she doesn't know the full extent. What about you? You could leave, file for divorce, rebuild your life. Robert smiled sadly. I'm 56 years old, David. My credit is destroyed. I have no savings. Everything goes to Patricia. I'm too tired to start over. But you're 32. You have your whole life ahead of you. You got out before she could trap you. That's why I said you saved yourself. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. I need you to do something for me. Actually, I need you to do it for yourself, in case Patricia follows through on her threat to sue you for wedding costs. I took the envelope. Inside were photocopied bank statements, credit card bills, and what looked like legal documents. What is this? Evidence, Robert said. Documentation of Patricia's debts, her spending patterns, records of her controlling our finances. If she tries to sue you, you'll need proof that her demand at the wedding wasn't just unusual. It was part of a pattern of financial abuse and coercion. Any judge will throw out her case once they see this. Why are you giving me this? Because someone needs to stand up to her. I can't. Sarah won't. But you can. And maybe, if you do, it'll finally force Patricia to face consequences for once in her life. I looked at the documents, at the proof of years of abuse and manipulation, and felt a strange mix of anger and sadness. What about Sarah? What happens to her? I don't know, Robert admitted. Part of me hopes this disaster will finally wake her up, make her see what her mother really is. But I've been hoping that for years, and it never happens. Patricia's hold on her is too strong. Should I talk to Sarah? Try to help her? That's up to you. But David, and I mean this, you need to protect yourself first. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And right now, Sarah's still choosing her mother over everything else, including her own happiness. We talked for a while longer, Robert sharing more details about Patricia's schemes, her manipulation tactics, the way she isolated the family from anyone who might challenge her control. By the time we finished, it was getting dark outside. As we stood to leave, Robert gripped my hand firmly. Thank you for listening, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't warn you. I'm sorry Sarah wasn't strong enough to choose you, and I'm sorry you had to go through yesterday's humiliation. But I truly believe you made the right choice. What will you do now? He shrugged. Go home. Pretend I was running errands. Deal with Patricia's rage that you're not coming back. Same as always. That's not a life, Robert. No, he agreed quietly. It's not. I watched him walk to his car, shoulders hunched, moving like a man twice his age. He'd given up. He'd surrendered to Patricia's control so completely that he couldn't even imagine a way out anymore. I drove home with the envelope on my passenger seat, thinking about everything Robert had revealed. The trap had been so much worse than I'd realized. I hadn't just walked away from a difficult mother-in-law. I'd escaped a system designed to financially drain and control me for years or even decades. And Sarah. Sarah wasn't the villain, but she wasn't innocent either. She'd been raised in this toxic environment, conditioned to see financial abuse as normal, taught that protecting her mother's secrets was more important than protecting her relationships. She'd known what was coming and hadn't warned me. That was a choice, even if it was made under duress. Could I have saved her? Should I have tried harder to pull her away from Patricia's influence? Maybe. But Robert was right. I had to protect myself first. And trying to rescue someone who actively participated in a plan to trap me wasn't love. It was codependency. When I got home, I found one more message from Sarah, sent an hour ago. My dad said he talked to you. I know what he told you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I was weak and I let you down. I understand if you never forgive me, but I needed you to know. I did love you. I still do. That part was real. I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone down without responding. Maybe the love had been real. But real love wasn't enough when it came with conditions, control, and a plan to turn me into another Robert, another ghost in my own life, funding someone else's addiction while receiving an allowance from my own paycheck. I'd made the right choice by walking out. Even if it hurt, even if part of me still loved the woman I thought Sarah was. Because that woman didn't exist. She never had. A week passed. 7 days of uncomfortable conversations, explaining to friends and family what had happened, fielding questions from coworkers who'd heard rumors, meeting with a lawyer to start annulment proceedings. Every day, I expected Patricia to make good on her threat to sue, but nothing came. Just silence from Sarah's family. Sarah continued to text occasionally, never demanding or angry, just sad, apologetic messages that I didn't respond to. I kept them all, documentation in case things turned legal, but I couldn't bring myself to reply. What would I even say? Marcus checked on me daily. My mother came over twice with food and comfort, and a deliberate refusal to say, "I told you so," even though she probably wanted to. My boss was surprisingly understanding, giving me a few days off to deal with personal matters without requiring details. The hardest part was the quiet moments, when I'd think about the future I'd lost. Not the future with Patricia's control and Sarah's silence, but the future I'd imagined, the one with kids and family dinners and growing old with someone. That future was gone, and I was grieving it even though it had never been real. On day 8, a Wednesday afternoon, I came home from work to find a manila envelope wedged in my doorframe. No postage, no return address, just my name written in careful handwriting on the front. I brought it inside, poured myself a drink, and sat down at the kitchen table before opening it. I wasn't sure what to expect. Legal papers from Patricia, maybe? A letter from Sarah begging me to reconcile? What I found was more shocking than either. Inside the envelope were several items: a handwritten letter, several legal documents, photocopied checks, and bank statements. I started with the letter, written in the same careful handwriting as my name on the envelope. David, I'm leaving. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I've filed for divorce from Patricia, emptied the emergency fund I've been hiding for 3 years. She never knew it existed. And I'm moving to my brother's place in Arizona. He's been telling me to leave for years. I should have listened sooner. Watching you walk out of that wedding changed something in me. I saw a man, a younger, braver version of myself, choose freedom over fear. And I realized that I'd been using Sarah as an excuse to stay, telling myself I was protecting her when really I was just too scared to leave. But staying wasn't protecting her. It was teaching her that this kind of relationship is normal, that letting someone control you financially and emotionally is just what family does. I can't save Sarah. She's an adult, and she'll have to make her own choices. But I can save myself, finally, after all these years. The documents in this envelope are for you. I've made copies of everything: Patricia's debts, her credit card statements going back 5 years, documentation of her financial control over me and Sarah, and proof of the scheme she planned with you. If she sues you for wedding costs, and she probably will, she's furious and getting desperate, give these to your lawyer. They'll show a pattern of financial abuse and manipulation. No judge will side with her once they see this. I've also included something else: copies of checks Patricia wrote to various creditors over the past 2 years, many of which bounced. Some of her credit card debt comes from fraud, using other people's information, including mine and Sarah's, to open new cards when her own were maxed out. I don't know if you'll need this information, but I wanted you to have it. If she comes after you legally, you'll have ammunition to defend yourself. I also wanted to apologize, properly, for not warning you. I was a coward. I let you walk into a trap because I was too afraid to stand up to my wife. You deserved better. Sarah deserved a father who would have protected her from her mother's influence instead of just surviving it. But thank you, David. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to choose freedom. I'm 56 years old and starting over with almost nothing, but for the first time in 20 years, I'll be in control of my own life. That's worth everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you can understand. Take care of yourself, Robert. I set the letter down with shaking hands and looked through the documents he'd included. Bank statements showing Patricia's spending patterns, thousands of dollars a month on shopping, luxury items, things she didn't need while Robert lived on a $200 allowance. Credit card statements with balances in the tens of thousands, minimum payments barely denting the accumulated interest, letters from collection agencies, notices of bounced checks, and most damning, applications for credit cards in Sarah's name, signed with Patricia's handwriting. Applications in Robert's name, also clearly forged. Patricia hadn't just been financially irresponsible, she'd been committing identity theft against her own family members. I sat there for a long time, processing everything. Robert had finally done it. He'd left. And in leaving, he'd given me the tools to protect myself from whatever Patricia might try next. 3 days later, I got my answer. A courier delivered a legal complaint. Patricia was suing me for $50,000 in wedding expenses, claiming that I'd breached a verbal contract to marry her daughter and owed restitution for the costs incurred. I immediately called the lawyer I'd hired for the annulment and gave him everything. Robert's documents, the evidence of Patricia's debt and fraud, the documentation of her financial abuse. My lawyer actually laughed when he saw it all. This case will be thrown out immediately, he said. And honestly, with this evidence, your ex-mother-in-law should be more worried about criminal charges than winning a lawsuit. He was right. 2 weeks later, Patricia's lawyer withdrew the case. Apparently, when presented with the evidence I had, he'd advised her that pursuing the lawsuit would expose her to serious legal consequences, including potential charges for identity theft and fraud. I never heard from Patricia again. Sarah texted one more time, about a month after the wedding. I heard my father left. He sent me a letter explaining everything. I didn't know about the credit cards in my name. I didn't know how bad things were. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger. I'm sorry I chose wrong. I hope you find someone who chooses you back. I responded this time. I hope you find the courage your father found. You deserve better than what your mother taught you love looks like. She never replied, and I didn't expect her to. Maybe someday she'd break free, like Robert had. Maybe she'd spend the rest of her life under Patricia's control, repeating the same patterns. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. The annulment was finalized 6 weeks after the wedding. Legally, it was as if the marriage had never happened. Emotionally, it took longer to process, but I was working on it. Seeing a therapist, spending time with friends and family, slowly rebuilding my trust in relationships and my own judgment. Marcus took me out for drinks when the annulment papers were finalized. To freedom, he toasted, raising his glass. To freedom, I echoed, and to dodging the bullet of a lifetime. So what now? Back to dating apps? Swear off women forever? Join a monastery? I laughed. None of the above. For now, I'm just going to focus on myself. Figure out who I am without someone else's expectations weighing me down. And next time, if there is a next time, I'll pay attention to the red flags instead of ignoring them. Lessons learned the hard way. The only way that sticks. A few months later, I got one final piece of mail related to the whole mess. A postcard from Arizona, Robert's handwriting on the back. David, settled in Arizona. Working as a mechanic again. First time in years I'm doing something I actually enjoy. Living in a small apartment that's all mine. Every dollar I earn is mine to spend or save. It's incredible. Sarah called me last month. We talked for 3 hours. She's still living with her mother, but she opened her own bank account. Small steps. Thank you for the courage you showed that day. It saved us both. R. I pinned the postcard to my refrigerator, a reminder that walking away from something toxic, even something you love, even something you invested years in, isn't failure. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. Sometimes the biggest heartbreak saves you from the biggest trap. That's what I tell people when they ask about my wedding day, the day I walked out on my own marriage in front of 200 witnesses. They expect a story of regret or bitterness, but that's not what they get. I tell them about the red flags I ignored because I wanted so badly to be in love. I tell them about a family held hostage by one woman's need for control. I tell them about a father who lived as a prisoner in his own house for 20 years and how watching me choose freedom finally gave him permission to do the same. And I tell them that yes, it hurt. It hurt like hell. Walking away from Sarah, from the future I'd imagined, from the relationship I'd invested 2 years in, that pain was real and deep and lasted for months. But you know what would have hurt more? Staying. Handing over my financial autonomy. Becoming another Robert, another ghost in my own life. funding someone else's addiction while living on an allowance from my own paycheck, watching my credit destroyed, my savings drained, my identity stolen, my future mortgage to pay for someone else's past mistakes. That would have been a lifetime of pain, not just months. It's been a year now since the wedding that never was. I'm doing well. My career is thriving. I got a promotion 6 months ago. My relationships with family and friends are stronger than ever. I'm dating again, cautiously, with much better boundaries and much clearer red flags to watch for, and I'm happy. Genuinely, freely happy in a way I don't think I ever was during those 2 years with Sarah, even though I believed I was at the time. Sarah, from what I hear through mutual acquaintances, is still living with her mother, still working at the hospital, still trapped in the same patterns, the same cycle of control and compliance. Part of me feels sad about that. Part of me hopes she'll eventually find her own courage to leave. But mostly, I've accepted that her journey isn't mine to manage. Robert sends postcards every few months, updates from his new life in Arizona. He's dating someone, apparently, a woman who works at the same auto shop. She makes her own money and has her own opinions, he wrote in his last card. It's terrifying and wonderful. I understand exactly what he means. The wedding disaster became a weird legend in my social circle. People bring it up at parties, always in hushed tones, always with a mixture of horror and fascination. Tell them about the wedding, someone will say to a newcomer, and then I'm expected to perform the story like a stand-up routine. I don't mind. There's power in owning your story, in being able to laugh at the absurdity of it all while acknowledging the very real pain underneath. And here's what I've learned from the whole experience. Love isn't supposed to trap you. It's not supposed to come with ultimatums or financial control or demands that you surrender your autonomy. Real love, healthy love, makes you freer, not more constrained. It builds you up instead of breaking you down. It asks for partnership, not submission. I didn't know that before. I thought love meant compromise, sacrifice, putting someone else's needs before your own. And sure, healthy relationships require those things sometimes. But there's a difference between occasional compromise and systematic control, between reasonable sacrifice and complete surrender, between consideration and coercion. The ultimatum Patricia delivered at my wedding wasn't love in any form. It was a trap disguised as family obligation. And the fact that Sarah couldn't or wouldn't defend me revealed that whatever we had, it wasn't strong enough to build a life on. So yes, I walked out of my own wedding. Yes, it was humiliating and painful and socially awkward for months afterward. Yes, I lost deposits and investments and 2 years of my life. But I kept my freedom. I kept my financial autonomy. I kept my ability to make my own choices and control my own destiny. And in the end, that was worth everything. Sometimes the biggest heartbreak saves you from the biggest trap. And sometimes walking away, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when everyone's watching, is the bravest and most loving thing you can do. For yourself, if not for anyone else.